that's sort of where the nexus of Black Box Project came from. So if you think about the context of aviation, right, we understand what a black box is in aviation. In this instance, the black box is people's personal devices, right? So their cell phones, their tablets, and even their laptops. What the project does is we borrow, it is always a borrow, we do not keep. We borrow digital devices of service members and service members, active duty service members, and veterans who have died by suicide. We borrow them from their surviving family members. We copy the data that's on those devices. We do not connect them to the internet. We don't log into any apps. We essentially take a snapshot of what's on that device. Immediately, it is depersonalized and de-identified. And then all of the device data that we've collected thus far is pooled, and that data is analyzed.
Welcome back to Security Halt Podcast. With me today is Kim Burditt from Stop Soldier Suicide, and more importantly, from her own project, Black Box Project. Kim, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, Denny. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So it's on top of everybody's mind, especially coming off of fighting season. We've lost the majority of our friends in that glorious forever summer, like we like to call, in both Iraq and Afghanistan. So, of course, we have to talk about suicide today. And I'd like you to kick it off by telling us your own story.
Thanks, Denny. I wish it wasn't my story, right? If I could go back and change it, I sure would. But my first exposure to the world of suicide came when my own brother, who was a Marine Corps veteran, died by suicide in April of 2010. John, his name was John, Jon. He was my only sibling. He was almost 11 years younger than me. And it was relatively out of the blue for us. So he had been out of the Marines for 6 years. He never was deployed. He never saw combat. And he was a homebody. He was an introvert. He was a real sweet, kind soul. When he joined the Marines, we were all shocked because we thought the military was going to be a great option for him. We were thinking, my dad was an Air Force vet, so we were thinking maybe he'd do Air Force, Navy, something, even Coast Guard. And when he signed with the Marines, it just didn't sort of fit his personality. We were kind of surprised, but thrilled. When he died by suicide, like I said, it was relatively out of the blue for us. Even honestly, knowing what I know now, working in this field for the last 12 and a half years, knowing what I know now about warning signs and risk factors, he really didn't show that many warning signs, even on the look back. But when he died, at the time, I live in southern New Hampshire now. I was living in Massachusetts, close to my parents. He was in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts is fairly resource rich in terms of their statewide suicide prevention budget. And a good chunk of that is for postvention care, which is care for those who are impacted by a suicide loss. So my family was connected to resources pretty early on. And that made a remarkable difference because we didn't know anyone who had experienced a loss like this. We didn't know what to do. You're sort of thrust into this wilderness of grief. I mean, everyone has lost someone that they've loved, right? Along the line, people die, right? This is a very unique type of grief. I would never say it's more or less difficult or, than any other type of sudden or traumatic loss. I don't know that to be true, and I don't want to know. But it's definitely more complicated. There's more layers to it. And we, like I said, we're thrust into this wilderness, no compass, no map, no idea what to do. But those resources we were connected to in the state had, the majority of that was peer support. So, connecting to other people who had experienced this loss. And what's so wonderful about peer support is that it validates your experience. You're not the only one. This just can feel so isolating. Yeah. Very shortly after John died, I had the sense that I was going to do something with this. I did not know what it was. My background at the time, my kids were little, so I was home. I was working part-time. I was raising my kids. My background was in marketing and graphic design and, 100 years ago. And I had no idea what it would look like, but I knew I needed to make space in my life to do whatever, whatever was going to happen with this. I knew that, that day changed everything. So fast forward about a year, I had an opportunity to get a part-time job working for one of those organizations that provided that peer support that my family had engaged with. And so I worked for them for about a year and a half doing some statewide trainings in suicide prevention for a very specific population, for gatekeepers of older adults, because back then older adults it was the largest suicide rate in the state and also in the country, not the suicide number, but the suicide rate.
Yeah.
So there was funding and there was, so I was going around doing some trainings. And then I had an opportunity through some volunteer work, I was exposed to an organization that provided specific support to military and veteran families who had lost their loved one to suicide. And I worked for that organization. It was called TAPS. Some people may have heard of it, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. I worked for them for almost 10 years and specifically worked with, again, families who were impacted by suicide. What was unique about that is that a lot, not all, but many of the staff at TAPS were like me, were survivors who wanted to impact the field somehow, who wanted to work in the field somehow. And being surrounded by people who are grieving their own loss and actively grieving, right? Because we don't ever really stop grieving that loss, right? Yet also professionally and, shoring up their professional experience with education, working in the field, making an impact in the field, becoming thought leaders in the field. I was so incredibly fortunate to be exposed to all that, and therefore exposed to, some of the leading experts in the grief field, in suicidology. That's actually a word. And was able to, to sort of set my sights on, okay, this is the work that I want to do. And right alongside, like I said, you are also grieving, right? You're always in your sort of grief journey because life is just going to keep on lifing, right? And every bit of it, as my kids get older and graduate college and, get met, my brother is not a part of any of that, right? Doesn't have an opportunity to be a part of any of that. So life keeps happening. And I was exposed to these people who were not only surviving after their own, traumatic, horrible suicide loss, but even thriving. And that led to a search for me. Once I had heard the term, I had never heard of it before, but post-traumatic growth. I did not witness or find my brother when he died. He died at home. My dad found him. My dad absolutely had some trauma around that and the effects of that. I did not, but my imagination was enough. And so, I would never liken it to my dad's experience, but, and again, I think I had my own little touch of trauma around that. And the loss, I think, is traumatic. And, again, being surrounded by these people, I came to identify, okay, that's post-traumatic growth. Like they are, there's if you read about definitions of post-traumatic growth, it talks about things like making purpose and meaning after the loss, experiencing a deeper appreciation for life, for the people in your life, for the relationships you have. You just value things a little bit differently. People will say the phrase, "Oh, so he didn't die in vain." That's in the neighborhood, but it's not quite deep enough. And once I learned about post-traumatic growth, I understood like, okay, I have been fortunate enough to experience that, not because I intentionally set out on it. I had never heard of that phrase, but, was able to experience that because of who I've been exposed to, who I've been fortunate enough to sponge up knowledge from and learn along the way. And some of the choices that, by the grace of God, honestly worked out the way that they did. So I knew that this would be my lifetime's work. It would maybe look a little bit different depending on, where I am and how I'm able to do that. But working with suicide loss survivors, ideally in the military veteran space, is really, where my heart is. And that's really what has led me to the position that I'm in right now, which is really unique. And I'm really fortunate to get to do that. So, can I share about that now, Denny, or do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Or okay.
No, we'll keep. You're on the roll.
Yeah.
But I do want to interject real quick and kind of
Sure.
like slow the train down. Like it's important to highlight that none of this growth happens overnight. None of this
Absolutely
happens
not.
within a week or 2 weeks.
Absolutely not.
And
Years.
grief is a dance. It's something that you pick up, you work through, and if you're listening and you're a veteran, you probably can recall the Chaplin 5 steps. Very linear, very fast. You start and you drop it and you move on. But if you've lost somebody in combat, if you lost somebody at home, if you lost a family member, you understand that grief does not follow a linear path. What I was referring to earlier in the intro is the perfect summer. All of us at some point wanted and chased that deployment. We chased that adrenaline rush of going on a trip. We looked forward to it every summer. Or even when you went on those winter trips, you're like, man, I hope I get a little bit of that fighting season. And I want you to pause and I want you to reflect right now as we're coming through this summer of 2024. Did you experience any memories or any feelings of depression? Did you experience any days where you were just feeling a little heavier than normal? That's a little sign that you're still dealing with that grief. You're remembering, your body holds on to that memory. It's no joke why I say, like, hey, when summer comes, reach out to your friends. You've been on those rotations over and over and over again. And I didn't understand it. I wasn't intuitive of it. But you look on your phone, you look at your calendar, and you remember, oh, we lost that this day. We lost Jose this day. This is why I'm feeling this way. Even though we don't want to pick it up and hold it, when you pause and you reflect, you can understand there's a powerful connection and you still have grief to work through. Maybe it's not as encompassing and overbearing as a full depressive state. Maybe it's just a day where you're feeling a little bit low. That's a sign for you to reach out to your brothers. I know there's a lot of guys that can't do the memorial ceremonies. There's a lot of guys that can't do, the memorial workouts, and that's okay. In time, if you can, you will be able to do those things. Everybody has to move at their own pace. There is no plan of action for every human being to follow through for grief and loss. There's guides. There's great books out there, but at the end of the day, your speed is your speed. And oftentimes when we hear these powerful testimonies of being of service again, of being able to take your pain and your trauma and do something great with it, we immediately want to jump at that. I know when I first got better and I started started walking and crawling and understood what I was going through, I wanted to hurry up and try to bring everybody in on this journey. But you need to focus on you. You need to focus on your healing, your journey first. Just like my good friend Terry said the other day, if you are constantly operating on an empty or half filled cup, you're not doing anybody any service. And it's important to understand that when Kim highlights her journey, it's not as easy and as fast as a day or two. These are years.
Oh, don't we wish though, right? When you mentioned the 5 steps, were you referring to sort of the 5 stages of grief?
Yeah.
So what's interesting about that is I was fortunate enough to be mentored by someone who was good friends with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She wrote that for people who are dying.
Yeah.
Not people who have lost someone. So
yeah.
that,
and it's even advanced. It's changed over the years.
It has. And I love that you brought that up because I think it creates a really, it's a really hard expectation for people in grief, right? Because, okay, I do this. Now I'm supposed to do this and feel this, and then I'm better. It doesn't work that way. And not everyone feels all of those things, and certainly not in that order. So it creates this sort of unreachable expectation. And then we think we're doing it wrong. When in reality, if you're not hurting yourself and you're not hurting anybody else, there's no wrong in grief. You need to feel what you need to feel. Grief is meant to be felt, right? It has to be. I think the only way to process it is it's an inside job. You've got to do it. The interesting thing though is it'll wait for you. It'll be a gentleman, right? It will wait maybe on the back shelf in the closet if you need it to. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you need to kind of tuck it away because we're in the middle of a mission or in the middle of raising a 6-month-old or, whatever it is. We might need to tuck it away for a minute for survival purposes.
Yeah.
And that's okay. The good thing, I guess, good about it is you can, even if, all of the quote memorial ceremonies, all of that has passed or all of that has happened, you can still do something meaningful for you. You can, do something meaningful. It doesn't have to be what everyone else is doing. It doesn't have to be the big thing on social media. It doesn't have to, whatever connects you to that person and that memory, you can do that. And that is growth and healing for you and your grief journey, because it's all personal. It's all individual.
Yeah, I had a great senior leader that once said after an unfortunate event is grief is a luxury that we do not have right now. Meaning, this moment sucks. This moment in time sucks, and you're not going to be afforded the time to reflect on it. And you can cry and by all means feel it, but at the end of the day, when you were on a deployment, when you were on a mission, you didn't have time for that.
Right.
And that's why so many guys and gals on the backside, they're grieving not only the loss of a military career, a mission and a purpose that they thought was going to be the entirety of their life, but also every single loss they experienced along the way.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You just have to understand that you're a human being as much as you, and again, it's crazy how many individuals feel grief as a foreign entity. And I saw it firsthand. A funeral ceremony, sitting next to a great friend of mine who finally, we're sitting here mourning the loss of a friend, and he finally starts crying and he's like, I don't know what this pain is. I have zero concept of it. And that was one of the most insane moments. Here we have a guy that spent a career in the military, a MARSOC Raider, and he's just now coming to the understanding of what grief and pain is.
Yeah.
And so many of us are out there. You don't have to be a military veteran. You don't have to be a first responder. You're just a human being. Yeah. All of us can experience this. Yeah. And there's no concrete guidebook. You just have to be able to feel it and go through it.
We are a very grief avoidant society, right? Yeah. We just, we don't do difficult emotions, and especially that one. Yeah. But one of the things that I learned along the way, along my journey, is to reframe it, right? Think about it. Grief is a privilege, honestly, because this is going to sound harsh. Someone somewhere today is going to be in a horrific accident and die on a freeway. Yeah. If I don't know them, can I be sad about it? Sure. Can I feel for, sorry for that, sorry for their family, but that's not grief. I'm not grieving them. We only grieve people that we love. And I don't only mean, family love or romantic love. We only grieve people that we have that human connection to. Yeah. So when you reframe that grief is love, we are not a love avoidant society, right? Love's great. We have all sorts of holidays that celebrate that. But when you reframe, that grief is that connection to that person because they mattered. Of course, we're going to grieve. Of course we are. It's not a negative emotion. It's a positive. Of course we are. And of course we are for longer than 3 days that maybe, our corporate job gives us to plan the funeral and be done, right?
Yeah.
And be back to normal. Grief affects us spiritually, cognitively, physically. We physically feel, the emotions of grief release hormones in our bodies that affect our muscles. If you feel it, it's because you're feeling it. You physically feel it.
It's a crazy thing to think and reflect on. Somewhere along the line, evolutionary, this was instilled in us as a species. This is an essential part of being a human being.
Yes.
So just wrap your head around that. Just understand somewhere in infinite wisdom of our great and powerful creator, somewhere along the line, it was meant for us to have this experience.
We're supposed to.
We're supposed to do it. Just like you breathe, just like you feel love and you feel connection to your kids, your loved ones, you're meant to grieve. It's part of something that was developed within us as a species. It's part of us. Animals do it.
Yeah.
The thing is, the more you understand that it's a natural thing, the more you feel at ease, understanding that you're not going through something alien. You're going through one of the most connecting human experiences known to man.
Yeah. Yeah. The amazing thing is once you're able to muster up the courage to not only allow those feelings, but maybe even express it outwardly a little
Yeah.
bit. It's amazing how others will respond, because you've just sort of signaled that I'm okay to talk about this. I'm a safe person to talk about this. I'm going to be authentic about it because I know you're feeling it too at some point. But we can be real about this, and then the floodgates will open. That,
Yeah.
because you've given that signal that I'm real about this. I'm not gonna, and other people are just drawn to that. And because it's all about the human connection, right? It's
Yeah.
all about that. Like you said, it's that. I had never really thought of it that way, that evolutionary, like we're supposed to feel this,
Yeah.
right? It's part of who we're built to be. And again, if you love someone, if that person has a special place in your life, in your experience, and again, it's not, doesn't always have to be romantic love or familial love, or, but of course you're going to have that feeling. Of course you are. And it doesn't go away in a month. It just,
Yeah.
it can't. It's not you can't just flip the switch, right? We want to, because it's painful, right?
Yeah.
Over time, I do not believe that time heals all wounds. I think that's kind of a load of crap, but I think that what time does is it changes things, right? It gives you perspective. It gives you opportunity to learn, to pause, to feel. And, the story didn't happen. The fact is the fact, but
Yeah.
you're the one that changes, right? And that's, so much along my grief journey. For me, knowledge was power. The more I learned about suicide loss, the more I learned about, sort of suicidal ideation and behavior. And, that allowed me to think about my brother's perspective, to think about my parents' perspective, to learn more about sibling loss. And, and for me, that knowledge was, like I said, it felt empowering, because it was just such a foreign, we just didn't understand it. We had no point of reference for it. So for me, not everyone is like that, right? Not everyone can, I wanted to read everything I could the summer after my brother died. My mom couldn't, her attention span just wasn't there. So at the time, right? And to your point, everyone is going to do it a little bit differently. And I think if you can be open to allowing yourself to do that, to allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to try something that maybe it doesn't feel like you normally, but it might help. I had someone suggest art therapy. I can be creative. I am not an artist. I can't draw a stick figure. And someone said,
I will say, music therapy, art therapy are amazing modalities. And if you feel an aversion, if you feel I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do any of that shit.
That wasn't me. I'm like, I can't do that.
I'm not an artist. I can't do this. I'm telling you,
how's that going to help?
You'll be surprised what's happening in different parts of your brain when you're going through, and then not just grief. All my experience, I talk and share it openly. I went to a mental health treatment center. Shout out to Laura Ridge. It completely saved my life. And one of the things that you have to do there is you have to surrender and give away that control and be willing to try everything.
Be open. Yeah.
And be open to try everything.
Yep.
And one of the things that you will understand if you continue to dive into the research and continue diving into the books is when you tap into different parts of your brain, you allow for yourself to process things that you aren't normally willing to talk or speak about with your therapist. And you'll be surprised. There's a reason why people go to school and get these certifications and become art therapists and music therapists. There's efficacy to it. It works. So be willing to try anything, whether it's for grief or mental health. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work for you. But there's so many tools.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to think, okay, I mean, especially with my experience with grief, it may not work now, but maybe in 6 months, I don't know, maybe, maybe I'll try it again, or maybe I'll be in a different place then. Right. So I think, to your point, to be open to experiencing and give it a try. And if it doesn't feel like it helps right now, you haven't lost anything, right?
Yeah.
No worse for the wear, because it didn't hurt. It's certainly not going to hurt. It's not going to make it worse. and many times it feels like it can't get worse. Okay, well, if it can't get worse, then it can get better, right? Then,
Yeah.
that opens up the space for that. So it is certainly a journey. I'm glad that you highlighted that, because it, now 14, almost 15 years out, next spring, it'll be 15 years out. It does seem a little bit like a blur. But, looking back in that rearview mirror, it was work, it
Yeah.
really was. And some of it, once I learned, I knew pieces of that had to be intentional. I have to allow space for this to heal from it, right? You have to feel it to
Yes.
heal it. When people would say that, it would drive me nuts, but
220, shout out to them. That's her tag. Great organization. Love plugging them.
Yeah.
So yeah, quick shout out to 220. That's their tagline they use. You got to feel it to heal it.
Yeah.
And if you're in need of help right now, go right there. I'm going to put it on YouTube. Go to 220.
There you go.
Shout out to Dr. Pamela. Amazing lady. Great healer.
I didn't know what that meant though, right? Like I thought I am feeling it, right? Well, I was feeling the pain, but I wasn't, I don't think I was doing the intentional work of grief, right? Allowing the processing, allowing, to talk about the things, to allow the space to feel it intentionally, and not just kind of sit in the pain while trying to ignore it, right? If that kind of makes sense. I think the longer, I liken it to, I love analogies. If you think about, and I live on the East Coast, so if you think about the ocean, and if you think about an ocean wave, right, and many loss survivors will call it, people grief wave, but if no one has really ever tried this, because we know we can't do it, but if you think about an ocean wave coming up on the beach, you cannot hold that back. You can't. You physically cannot hold it back. We want to, right? We don't want to feel what's this wave is bringing. We don't want to. The energy you would exert to hold that back is, and you can't. It's coming anyway. The fear is that we don't know if that wave is gonna, just kind of come up to our ankles, if it's gonna splash our legs, if it's gonna take us out at the knees, right? I think the key is learning how you can sort of ride that wave, surf it, whatever analogy you want to use, but that to not necessarily fear the wave. And again, if we're supposed to feel grief because of love and human connection, then it's really not scary, right?
Yeah.
The other thing about an ocean wave is, by nature, they come up on the beach and they recede. It's not forever. It's, it's a feeling.
Dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
Everything dissipates. That's a great thing that
it does.
Mindfulness brought into my life, is understanding that no matter what emotion, no matter what suffering you're going through, and I use it with my students, man. Like I taught mindfulness to kids for a while, and one of the best lessons is, like, you ever hit your elbow? You ever hit your funny bone? Yeah, it hurts really bad. Yeah. How long does it last? So long. When I think about it, everything dissipates.
Yep.
Everything dissipates.
Yep.
And when we think of pain, whether it's physical or emotional, like, it ebb and flows, man. Good days, bad days. And that's something to take with you wherever you go, wherever you're at in your journey right now. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. You have days of dealing with that grief and dancing with it nonstop, and then you wake up, feel a little better, go a little better. And the key to it is continuing not to push it away, but embrace it and let it know that, hey, this is something I'm going through. I'm choosing to look at it, stare it in the face, understand it, and know that it's going to be okay. Like, whether it's having memories from friends you lost downrange or intimate family members that you've lost. Suicide is not something that one goes over and just smooths over in one day. It's something that'll stick with you. Good friends, family members, that's hard. But understand that with time and with your own progress and your own focus on it, and with assistance, you don't have to do it alone. That's a great thing. You don't have to go this road alone.
Mm-hmm.
You can get help to make that pain, instead of carrying that 135-pound rucksack on your back. Maybe you whittle it down to just 50 pounds and you can deal with that a little better.
Yeah.
I want to dive into your black box project, because this is something that, when I think of it, it makes sense, but I'm cautious and have a lot of questions, because when we're not there to interpret what our families might find, it might lead to more pain.
So it's interesting. I will share when I did not work at Stop Soldier Suicide before I was employed here, I learned of the Black Box Project, and I, quite frankly, was hell no, like no. It's an invasion of privacy. It is, to your point, they're not here to sort of defend themselves. What are we looking for? And by the way, what is going to be found in that digital device it's not going to give me the answer, right? It's not. It's one piece of a person's life, right? It's just one little puzzle of the entire. So I hear you. I hear you on that. I kept abreast of it though, because it was fascinating to me. And then pieces fell into place and there was a spot for me here. And I learned more about when I say they, I mean Stop Soldier Suicide as an organization, their perspective, their approach, and what they want to do with it, and how they are valuing and honoring that data. So that came through loud and clear to me, and that's what changed some of my understandings of. But I should back up just in case people are not aware. So Stop Soldier Suicide is an organization. We provide free, confidential telemental health care. So, virtual mental health care to anyone who's ever worn a uniform for a day, regardless of discharge, regardless active duty or veteran, for people who are moderate to high risk for suicide. So those people who are really struggling. This is not PTSD treatment. It's not depression or substance use treatment, not long-term treatment. It's for, the acute, people who are really struggling. The name of that service, although the organization is Stop Soldier Suicide, we service all, to anyone who's ever served in any branch. We were founded by 3 Army vets, so hence the name. But the name of our wellness operations, that's what it's called, is called Roger. So the website for that is goroger.org. And you can learn lots and lots more about that. And I can answer more questions about that. But as an organization, Stop Soldier Suicide is extremely focused on data and technology, meaning let's leverage the best technology out there. Let's learn what we can to better our services. So we are better, we can provide better care, we can better understand why people are, they get to this place where they're, really, really struggling and at high risk for suicide, and how do we better care for them? That's sort of where the nexus of Black Box Project came from. So if you think about the context of aviation, right, we understand what a black box is in aviation. In this instance, the black box is people's personal devices, right? So their cell phones, their tablets, and even their laptops. What the project does is we borrow, it is always a borrow, we do not keep. We borrow digital devices of service members and active duty service members and veterans who have died by suicide. We borrow them from their surviving family members. We copy the data that's on those devices. We do not connect them to the internet. We don't log into any apps. We essentially take a snapshot of what's on that device. Immediately, it is depersonalized and de-identified. And then all of the device data that we've collected thus far is pooled, and that data is analyzed. So we don't look at, John Smith's device and look for why did he die by suicide. We don't analyze any one single, through that lens. What happens is the data gets pooled and analyzed that way. And we're looking for behavioral trends and patterns that, then once we identify those, the desire is that we eventually can build interventions to go, to get in there digitally, right? In someone's digital life. So, as an example, if you're a gamer, and you're a veteran, you may have seen an ad, in the games, for Stop Soldier Suicide, because we spend a good amount of our marketing budget. We want to go to where struggling people are. We're not waiting for them to call us. We're going to go where they are. We're going to go to the places that they are, again, digitally, right? So if the Black Box Project, if all of our device data shows that in the majority of people that we've, the device data, the majority of those individuals their device was active overnight. We know they're not sleeping, right? If their device is active and we know that they are up overnight. And again, in the field of suicide prevention, that's not something new. We know that people who are struggling have a hard time sleeping, but that gives us the case for, okay, now we know, now let's add additional spending on our ads to go, in the middle of the night. Let's go to those places where they are so that we can better reach them and better get in front of them before the crisis point. So that's just a sort of a quick little summary. But my role in the Black Box Project is to engage with families and to share the project with them, to help them understand the ins and outs of it, to answer any questions, to see if it's something that they want to participate in. And again, it's a loan. The devices go back to them as we have received them. Many times, it's not an exact science, so I always want to set proper expectations, but many times we are able to unlock locked devices. And that can be attractive for families, right? Because there's maybe pictures or videos or, in there that they would like access to. To your point earlier, we know could potentially be some things in there that are not going to be helpful to the survivor, right? I mean, and that's literally how I phrase it to them. And I will say to them, look, if your device is locked and we're able to unlock it and we send it back to you unlocked, just know this may not apply for you and your loved one, but we've seen it happen. And I just want you to, to kind of be aware that there may be some things in there that you would learn if you're going through the phone after that you didn't know, and they may not be helpful. So, just sit with a trusted person, sit with, someone that a support person who can help you kind of go through those things. Because, if you can imagine a scenario, I've probably heard it, where the info on that device showed, maybe an addiction that the family members didn't know about, or all sorts of things. Right. And yes, the person that has died is not there to defend themselves through that. And this may sound a little odd. My concern is more with the survivors, right? Is to, to support them in that, this can be really hurtful and it can not be helpful for your grief journey, right? Okay. So you learned this, but it's done and over with. It's not, that is a part of that person's past and that person has died. So it's not, but, it can be hard. It can be hard for them. And like I said, I always want to level set those expectations and share that with them. And, cause it is it's a possibility. It doesn't happen often, honestly. No. It truly does not. But we want to make sure that they know, that potential exists. Right.
Yeah.
So
gathering metrics and analytics from a device. From a targeting standpoint, from the old SF days, that's viable information that you could use for so many things. But other than understanding where to place ads and where to target individuals, what else are you able to gather from this information, from all this data?
So the initial, I should say, this project is in the world of projects. And by the way, I have not used the term research because we are not a research study at this point. This is an internal initiative that we are using, within our own organization. In the future, will that change? Will we, work with a grad school for to help us analyze and mine the data more? I don't know. But right now, we're less than 3 years old. So it's still in its infancy. We are looking at, some of the things that we looked at in our very first round, and it was a very small sample. So I think it was 19 cell phones worth of data that we looked at. But that was over 600,000 text messages, right? And we were working with Amazon Web Services. We had to teach them, we were looking at sentiment. So changes in sentiment in the 6 months before a device went inactive, right? Or the date of death. So we were looking at changes in sentiment. And you think about, and this is a little bit probably above my tech understanding, or it's a little bit beyond, but you think about, changes in sentiment in terms of either, more perhaps self-depreciating language. We were looking at that. We were looking at expressions of anger. And by the way, we had to teach Amazon Web Services that, some choice curse words are probably, they don't come with the same weight or the same, expression of anger, or, that maybe they do in the civilian world. So we had to teach Amazon Web Services. But, if you look at those things and if you're able to identify those trends, right? So this is all my little fantasy, my supposing of what we could do with this, right? Say, I don't know, 5 years from now, what we've learned from this data, we have then developed an app that when we are providing treatment to someone with their full understanding and consent, they download this app onto their phone. That's a way for them to keep in touch with their clinician here and, to engage with us in treatment with us. Maybe we're not monitoring exactly what they're doing on their device, but but there is something in that app that monitors a change in sentiment, and we can tell it whether it's a negative change or, we could tell it to alert if it's a negative change or a positive change. Maybe that outcome is what's reported back to their clinician. And that could make the difference in, today's Wednesday. Maybe I'm the veteran. I don't have an appointment until next Wednesday, but my clinician has been alerted that there's been a change in my sentiment or a change in something that indicates increased risk based on the data that we've learned. That clinician's not going to wait till next Wednesday. They're going to reach out sooner, right? They're
Kim,
going to.
If you had access to every Green Beret and Navy SEAL and Ranger cell phone looking for a change in sentiment, you would be horrified at the way we communicate with each other. This is the one thing I will tell you right now. That will not work with our SOC professionals.
To your point,
the vast majority of our infantry and paratroopers, because the way that we communicate is so. Oh my gosh, the things that I have said and continue to say to my brothers and sisters, it's very different, and that's my pushback, because when I was in the depths of my struggles with suicide and suicide ideation, there was no text message that you could see that was out of line and out of character, and the mask was on 24/7. Mm-hmm. The only thing that had any, if you could see inside my head, you could hear the inner workings of the intrusive thoughts. But everything was through a layer of sarcasm, dark humor, and the way that we communicate. And that's my pushback with this and gather the analytics and this information is this may work within a civilian sector. But I will say for even our first responders, I've heard so many times we're the same, we talk the same way. It's so difficult to try to look at the way we're communicating and try to decipher it for there's a signal here. Because I will tell you, the friends that I've lost and the people that I know that I've lost friends in service, it was always individuals that are like, that's the pillar of strength. That's my dude. He'll never leave us. Just like that. So and you look back at every communication and it's never changed. It's, yeah, man, I got you, whatever you need. And it's those stories of dude, we were supposed to go fishing. We were supposed to go out. And there was no change in sentiment, no change in communication, because the mask stays on 24/7. Every way you communicate, emails, everything. And that's the only challenge I see. That's the only thing that I say that you're going to have, I would say, is a hard thing to look through.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't disagree with the sentiment as an example, right? I think that, and especially with your brothers and sisters, side by side, yes, I think you're going to maintain, but there's even, I think that's our point for why we need more data, right? Because there is even, and this is in the civilian world, and I don't have this statistic off the top of my head, but it's a known correlation between those who have to sort of maintain perfection and the pressure of that, and how that can be indicative of a struggle, right? Behind that, perceived need to show that mask all the time, to keep that mask on. The interesting thing about, versus, so in the world of suicide postvention, there is something called a psychological autopsy, where back when I worked at TAPS, there were some of the branches we had contracts with some of the individual branches to do psych autopsies with our surviving families. And a psych autopsy is just what it sounds like. You talk to a bunch of different people in that, then the person who's died life, to try to, get all the different perspectives, talk to, some of their coworkers, talk to their family, and to get all those perspectives and put together those puzzle pieces. The challenge with that is that it's inherently biased, right? Because it's through a human, right? And it's through that relationship. Your relationship, for lack of a better description, with your cell phone is first person, right? It's first person data, right? It's you. If you are, if a change in your behavior in your digital life, be it, whatever that might be, phone activity, sentiment, starting and not finishing, what could be interpreted as a suicide note, we've seen that fairly often, and then it gets deleted. Like lots of computers, there's little hard drives, and delete really doesn't mean delete, right? But to your point, this is just one piece, right? This is one piece of a person's entire persona, right? Just the novelness of this is that, no one's really looking at this. It's one approach. We know as an organization, to truly attack and impact the problem of active duty and veteran suicide, our model of clinical care, we'd have to scale that to a point that is just so unsustainable, like financially, and like the VA can't do it. Why would we think we can do it? But it can't be scaled to actually address the issue. And by the way, what's the percentage of veterans who are dying by suicide that aren't engaged in clinical care or treatment at all? What about them? We need to find them, the ones who aren't asking for help, the ones who aren't there, we need to, yes, the ones who are getting care and treatment, however they're getting it, great, because, help does help. But what about the others? We need to find a way to get to them too. So, this is not the end all be all, right? We don't think this is going to solve the problem. It's an additional way. It's one other way to approach this through a different perspective, to gather more data, to find out, what can we learn, and how can we create something that will get in there, right? And, and intervene literally before the point of no return. One of the things I think that is, I mean, it's cool and it's techie, and, and that's all great. And I think it's really, for some of our families and we've had almost 200 families, by the way, engage with us, and loan us, their loved ones' devices. So I'm sorry, almost 200 devices total. It's been about 85 families. The average family gives us, like between 2 and 3 devices to borrow. It's great to stand with suicide prevention when you are a loss survivor, because it gives, again, a little bit of that meaning and purpose. And that's where that post-traumatic growth piece comes in, because, it feels like, okay, I'm not doing nothing. If I can do something, so another family doesn't have experience what mine did, I want to do it. I want to help in some way. So, this is not only, I don't view this only as a suicide prevention initiative. It is, obviously. And that's what Stop Soldier Suicide does. That's our mission. But this also is really good for the survivors, right? It can be really helpful to them, and, give them something to help along in their grief journey. So.
Yeah. I don't think when you go into any endeavor or any mission, even something as big as this, you should ever see it as over daunting or like impossible.
Right.
I really do think that the culture needs to change within our veteran echo chambers, mostly in social media, Reddit. If you go to any of those places that are veteran heavy, there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of hopelessness. And I think we can combat that by having these discussions, but remaining hopeful and understanding that, like, I've gone up against insane odds before. We all have.
Yeah.
Like, the reality is no one's coming. The VA's not coming. The government's not coming. It's up to nonprofits, but at the end of the day, it's the human factor. If you are willing to get help for yourself, get better, start walking, start running, and start really thriving, then you can become a peer-to-peer support facilitator. There are
Absolutely.
millions of ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just be a great friend to one person. In
Yep.
the 82nd, we had this little saying called LGOPs, little groups of paratroopers.
Mm.
This was the first thing that helped me, was having my little LGOP. Shout out to Paul and Greg. Just being able to get connected with friends that are trying to get better, trying to identify what resources are out there. It works. I look now to where Paul's at. I look now to where Greg's at. I look now to where I'm at in my life. LGOPs work. Little groups of paratroopers sticking together.
Yep.
Eventually, I went to a treatment center. Eventually, Paul went to therapy. Eventually, Greg got better too. Every last one of us found things that we needed to jettison from our lives. And you can do it too. It's not hopeless. It's not as, look, the enemy's out there. It's every single day we're battling it. We're in the same fight together. It's just not personified in the face of a foreigner. It's a mental health issue. It's suicide. It's depression. It's anxiety.
Yeah.
We're not out of this fight, and you can win this. You can literally win this. All you have to do is focus on yourself, get a little bit better, and then reach out to your friends and help them find the same resources or different resources that help. And there are plenty of organizations. There are plenty of people out there to help you in your fight. Stop Veteran Suicide is one of them. Mission 22. The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
If you don't know where to start, reach out. Hit up Veteran Suicide today, or hit me up at psychoppodcast@gmail.com. I will get you plugged in with some people, or hit up any of my social media. You're not alone in this fight. There are thousands of individuals ready to help you today. And again, that's a powerful ally, somebody that's healed and willing to help others. It's a grassroots movement. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter what organization's trying to help. At the end of the day, we need you to stay in this fight. So please reach out today to Veteran Suicide. Kim, how do we get a hold of you and your organization?
So Stop Soldier Suicide, our website is just those words, stopsoldiersuicide.org. To, as I mentioned earlier, to engage in our treatment, to sort of do an intake, reach out for help that way. Again, free, confidential. We are a standalone nonprofit. We don't report to anybody, no government, nothing. That's goroger.org. And you can fill out an intake there. You can call us too. The 800 number is all over our website. And then, and also we will support you with other wraparound services and connect you to other resources and services too, because to your point, right, there are so many resources out there and not all are going to be what you need. And that's okay. But there is something out there that will help you. And there's so many people that are willing. And it's just a matter of reaching out that hand. And then others will do, we'll do the work for you. We're going to help you connect, to what you need. Regarding the Black Box Project, my email is my name. So it's kim.burditt@stopsoldiersuicide.org. And you can find more information about the Black Box Project on our website too. But like I said, I know that this is not something that's for everyone. We would love to share it with as many military and veteran loss survivors as possible to explore it and see if it's something that they'd like to participate in. We would be incredibly grateful because, our desire is, to your earlier point, Denny, like the government's not coming. The VA is not, we've got to approach this in a different way. We've got to be open to what can we learn? Hey, we're fully aware this project may not teach us anything new, right? It might not, but we've got to try, right? We've got to try. People need, we need to try different things to try to attack this problem. And we're willing, we're willing to do this. So, any loss survivors who want more information or want to just explore it, I would be more than excited to be able to do that. So it's such an amazing way to honor our loved ones, right? I think, if I could tell my brother all about this, what we're doing, I mean, I would have to think that he would be psyched. He'd be behind it. He'd be proud of, let's try to change it. So, others don't have to feel what he felt and other families don't have to experience what mine did. So thank you, Jenny.
Absolutely. Kim, thank you so much for being here today. To all you listening, thank you for tuning in. If you need help, please reach out today. Don't wait till tomorrow. And we'll see you all next time. Till then, take care.
Thanks so much.